Welcome to the November 3rd, 2015 regular scheduled meeting of the Davie County Board of Education. At this time, if you would, please bow with me for the invocation. As we gather this evening, I express thanks for this day and all of its blessings. I ask this board to be mindful of the business we are about to undertake. We are thankful for everyone in attendance tonight. Further, we are thankful for the opportunity to govern and the freedoms we enjoy. We pause to remember the students, faculty members, and families in our system and community who are facing challenges. Our positive thoughts are with them. As always, we seek wisdom to make the best decisions for the students and citizens of Davie County. Amen. At this time, I will ask Boy Scout Troop 574 from the First United Methodist Church to come up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Opportunity. This is Cub Scout Pack 574 from downtown First United Methodist Church. We'd really like to thank the Board of Education and Davie County for allowing us to go into Davie County schools and recruit these young men. We went from a pack of 18 to over 40 boys. We recruited out of Moxville Elementary and Cornanster Elementary, and we really believe this is a worthwhile endeavor, and these boys are growing into fine young men in front of our eyes, so we want to thank you guys very much. We're led by Jason Lawrence, our Cub Master. I'm Georgia Taylor, the committee chair of Pack 574, and these are our Tigers, who are in first grade in orange, our Wolves in yellow in second grade, our Bears in blue in third grade, and then Earnhardt is a Webelow. Those are our fourth and fifth graders. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're glad that you guys got to come and share with us today. We're glad to hear, and thank you for all the good things you folks are doing in the community. At this time, we're moving on to adopting the agendas next on the agenda, and I'll ask for a motion to adopt the agenda. We have a motion by Ms. Livengood. Do we have a second? We have a second by Mr. Drexler. All in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Next on the agenda, we're moving on to the approval of the minutes from our regular scheduled meeting of October the 6th. Do we have a motion to adopt those, approve those minutes? We have a motion by Mr. Junker. Do we have a second? We have a second by Ms. Owens. All in favor? Motion carries 7-0. At this time, we're moving on to important dates, and I'll point out a few. We have our Stars of the Year banquet, 6 o'clock next Monday, November the 9th. I'll point out Veterans Day, Wednesday the 11th. We have the board has a annual conference. The North Carolina School Board Association has an annual conference in Greensboro, 16th through the 18th. We're having lunch at Davie County Early College on the 19th. Looking forward to that. And then we can't leave out Thanksgiving holidays, the 26th through the 27th. And then our regular scheduled meeting will be here in this room on the 1st, which is the first Tuesday in December. And with that, I will hand it off to Dr. Hartness for our superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you out on this rainy evening. I have just a couple updates to share with the board tonight, and I'll have some further comments on some other agenda items that are later in the agenda. But we had planned to give you a curriculum update, as we had talked about last time when we shared our accountability. We have some folks that are at some training this evening with a group of teachers, and we're not able to be here, so we're going to do that in December. I want to give you a couple updates on some things I've been up to this month. I was invited to come and speak to a group of doctoral students at High Point University a couple weeks ago on Saturday, some students who are going into school administration. It's a good opportunity for me to go out and see our future leaders in this region and talk with them. I also had an opportunity to present to 28 of my fellow superintendents at their Digital Learning and Leadership Institute at NC State this month. We are going to be meeting a couple more times this school year and bringing some of our staff with us in February to discuss digital leadership in North Carolina and how we're implementing digital resources in our schools. And I share those things with you because I want you to know that we're constantly out there looking at ways we can be better as a school district and we can better utilize the resources that we have. I want to thank those of you who were together with me at the law conference a few weeks ago. It was nice to see you engaged in learning from some of the best resources across the state, including our own attorney, Ms. Jill Wilson, who was there presenting. But it was a good time together as a board, and I know that you enjoyed that, and I enjoyed spending time with you as well. One of the things that we continue to do and focus on, which is our most important mission, is academic progress. And last month, Aaron Full did an outstanding job explaining to you the accountability results this past year. And we continue as a staff to try to dive into those and better understand what they mean and what they mean for our students and what they mean for our staff. We are very fortunate as a school district when I hear my colleagues talking about the hoops that they are jumping through when they have low-performing schools in their district. We're fortunate we don't have any low-performing schools, and I'm very proud, and you should be proud of our district for the progress that we have made. But we always want to be better and want to get better. One of the ways that we get better is to analyze our results. And one of the things that we've been doing as a staff, and I've been working with some other superintendents, is the state has done some analysis of student assessments in the state. They've had some alignment studies done by a group out of Wisconsin, and we've been studying those carefully to determine the alignment between the standards that our teachers are asked to teach and what's actually being tested in this state. And to say that we're all glad about the results, we're not. We have some concerns about alignment of those assessments to our standards. And we're posing some difficult questions to some leaders in the state of North Carolina. Bottom line, and I think you saw this if you saw the results last time, was that performance in this state is flat for the last 3 years. We've never experienced that or seen that in our state before when standards and assessments changed. Typically, there's a dip in performance, and each year you have a 4 to 5% increase in proficiency, and we're just not seeing that across the state. So that raises a flag, and I believe our teachers and students deserve to understand why that is the case. And again, we're still performing well above the state average. We want to do better, but there are some questions that we have, I think some hard questions that the state has to answer and the state board has to answer at some point in time when we see performance flat the way we've experienced. So we're continuing to look at those alignment, and I think why we continue to do that is when you link promotion and retention, especially at third grade, you link teacher evaluations and performance to accountability standards and assessments. That's about as high stakes as it gets, and we want to ensure that the assessments we're using are accurate, valid, reliable measures of those and available to be used in a proper way. So you'll hear more about that to come as we continue to study and find out more about that subject. In August, I was asked to come and speak to the faculty as they came together, like we do at Convocation, at Davidson Community College at their Davidson campus, and spent some time talking with them and answering questions about students who transition to the community college and how we can better partner between K-12 and the community college system. One of the things that I challenged them at that meeting to do is, let's sit down with your professors and our teachers in our 2 high schools and talk. And they took us up on that offer. And a few weeks ago, one afternoon, we had teachers from the early college and from Davie High and professors from the community college come together and spend a couple hours together talking about our student performance and talking about the challenges that students have as they enter the community college campus in that setting. And we learned a lot from each other. And the professors at Davidson Community College have agreed to share their syllabi with our teachers so that we can better learn what expectations are at the community college level. Some really good dialogue. One of the things that's pretty encouraging is when we started asking about the performance of our students who leave Davie County schools, how do they perform when they come to the community college? We heard that number one, their graduation rate is higher than the average at Davidson Community College. Number two, we heard their graduation rate was much higher than the state average when they left Davie County schools and went to the community college. And number three, we learned that our students have a much lower need for remediation courses. So I think that's a positive sign of the things that we're doing and the preparation that our students have when they leave Davie County schools. So those were good data points for the community college to share with our staff, and I think they were pretty encouraging. But again, this type of communication we consider to be really important, and we want it to be ongoing so that we can better prepare our students, whether they're going straight into a career, going to our community college system, or going to a university. So those are some things we've been up to as a staff and been involved in this past month. It's hard to believe we're in November, and I see the technology staff's got a turkey up here. So that means that the holidays are just around the corner. I'm very pleased at where we are this time of year, and as you heard me say so many times, there are great days ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Hartness.
Dr. Hartness, I'm going to follow up with that. You have access or had that information from Davidson Community College. Do you have it with any of the other, like Rowan or Forsyth?
We have not received any type of feedback from those. We haven't had that conversation. I really don't. One of the things is it's very difficult to track students once they leave the K-12 into the community college system because we have different systems. So that Davidson has made a concerted effort to pull some data and to do some research. I don't know what the numbers are in Rowan and Forsyth Tech, but that's something we could consider exploring in the future.
Thank you for that update. At this time, we're moving on to our facilities update on the new high school project. And I'll ask Mr. Jim Moorfield to come up. Tell us how things are going.
Good evening. How are y'all? Great. In spite of the weather, we've had a really good month. And it's probably a lot of it's repetition. You know, we lay block about every day. We pour concrete footings about every day. About once a week we pour slabs. So it's a lot of the same thing over and over. But we've made a lot of progress. We've doing a lot of work in the classroom tower, and that has proved to be, our quality seems to be getting better. And I'm really encouraged with what we're accomplishing at the site. The other thing that we have done is we've started paving, and we have War Eagle Drive paved, and down to the Little League Drive. All of that is ready, and we're now just awaiting the approval from the federal agency to reroute that traffic. So we're ready when they are. And I have a picture that I want to share with you this evening, to give you an idea of the quality that you are getting at the high school. And it is amazing that our electrical contractor can put something in place that's this pretty. I'll show you that. This is a conduit run out of the Section C electrical room, and anybody that's ever had anything to do with running conduit will confirm that what you see on that picture is just absolutely most difficult to accomplish. So we're getting excellent quality from the subs at the project. And the other thing I would like to share with you this afternoon or this evening is a photo of our paving that took place on War Eagle Drive. I don't know if any of y'all have been by, but a portion of that road is complete, and it looks real good. And we continually have meetings with the subs to try to get them to improve their quality as they work on the project. And they're very responsive to our request. This morning, we met with Energy United and started the first design meeting of the overhead electrical service into the building. Just a very good meeting with those folks. We're all on the same team. They will be there in the summer, and we look forward to them being there, and we don't foresee any problems. So we were real encouraged with that meeting this morning. Went real well. And we have temporary power, so bringing them in the summer helps a lot keeps them out of the mud, keeps all of the things that they could destroy by going underground in some areas. That will all be they will be out of that area, so it'll be a lot easier for them to do their underground work. But I can't say enough about how we're progressing at the job site. It's really gone well. I'm real pleased, and last few days we haven't accomplished a whole lot, but I was there briefly this morning, and the masons was working. So, any questions? Yes, sir.
I do have one, and it's probably maybe Dr. Hartness, I don't even know if he would be aware of it. Do we have any idea where we're at on that road approval? Because I did notice, I've been in and out of the complex for the last several weeks, and it really does look good as that road comes down through there and it ties into it. And I noticed they'd stopped and barricaded it off back towards Farmington Road. I just wondered if do we get updates on that? Do we have any idea where we may be on that?
Yeah, I mean, what you've seen and what you said right there is accurate. The road all the way into and connecting into the current Little League Drive has been connected. It's been curb and guttered. It's ready for use, but we do not have final approval yet from the federal government to remove the existing road and turn traffic onto that road. We're expecting it anytime. So.
I believe they sowed some grass down through there too, and that cleaned it up and it looks good.
First off, I'd like to thank you again for coming tonight, and this may be in the plans and I might have missed it, but is there a plan to put lighting, lamp posts for better?
Site lighting.
Yeah, the tall lights going down that
Yes.
road.
Yes, there is. There will be site lighting, excuse me, in most areas, but that is normally one of the last things that we would do. We would get everything to the point of right before we would do seating. We would come in and do that. So it's plus you don't want to schedule a portion of that now and then come back and do another portion. So it's everywhere. It will be impressive once
Oh, I'm
you're
sure.
there at night.
Well, lighting has just always been a topic that we've talked about for years and years, and that was something that,
Yes.
we were missing at our existing campus, so.
But we'll probably do that the spring or late winter of next year.
Well, good.
Just because it's one of the things you want to have all of your curb and gutter, all of your
Sure.
paving, and almost all of your final grading in place before you do that.
Well, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Those conduit runs are impressive. Parallel and clean lines. They're very impressive. We've got one other item that I was going to discuss during this time. We have, I think Mr. Drexler had asked for an update on the budget as it is for the school project. And I think we'd put that together for September. And I'm going to let Dr. Hartness talk about that for just a minute, and then board can discuss that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we did give the board a budget update outline on September the 1st. And what that entails is an update of each of the different soft costs and an update on the contract cost. And I would just remind the board that the contract with the contractor is a fixed cost, and if there are change orders beyond that cost, the board would be involved in approving those. So we would bring you change orders related to that. We can look at that. What we did was in September, when you requested that, I said that's a great idea to give the board a budget update. Just so happened I talked with Ms. Smink, and she had just reconciled everything with the county. Well, the way this works is there's a long process of payment for each of the stages of construction. When there is a pay application from any of the subcontractors, they go through the general contractor. The general contractor reviews those, and those then go to Jim, our project manager, and the architectural firm. They all have to sign off that, yes, this work has been done, it's been completed, it's in alignment with where we should be in the construction schedule, before it then comes to Mr. Wallace. Mr. Wallace then reviews that, and then it goes to Ms. Smink. And then Ms. Smink reviews that. Sounds like I'm telling a joke here, doesn't it? And then it goes to the county. And then the county finance department processes that payment, because none of the payments come from Davie County Schools. They come from the county of Davie through the county manager and county finance office. So there are several weeks involved in the process of a pay application, making it through to final payment back to the subcontractors through the contractor. Long story short, that reconciliation process in what we have submitted and what has been paid requires two agencies to get together to talk and reconcile their books. We felt like there's not enough changes in a 24-month schedule to do that every 30 days, unless we were going to increase the workload of our finance officer, the assistant finance officer, and finance officer at the county. So we felt like it would be sufficient to provide a reconciled report every 90 days or quarterly. And if there was something that was unusual that came up that we needed to deal with, of course, Mr. Moorfield's going to bring that to us each month. If we got into providing the board a monthly report of just what we had received as pay applications, if someone tried to reconcile that with what had been paid by the county, they would always be different. And in my history here, there are a few people in this community who like to reconcile everything, and if there's anything different, something must be wrong and there must be a conspiracy. So we chose instead to do a reconciliation quarterly. If the board wanted us to do something monthly, we could do that without reconciling with the county and just give you an update of where pay requests had been. But you would have to know that it wouldn't reconcile with anything with the county. Does that make sense?
I would rather do the 90-day and just be clean. I think that's, and like you said, if something comes up, change order that we have to vote on, we will know about it ahead of time.
Well, I'd like to see the pay application monthly and then quarterly see a reconciled report. You know, I don't know how detailed or how much trouble it'd be. I think you could just, hopefully just generate that report, you know, with the understanding that this is not reconciled, and we'll reconcile it quarterly with the county, because we don't have any control of what the county does or how they handle it, and we may not have any control over what feedback we get from them. So, you know, I'd like to see it, you know, done that way personally, but, you know, and I don't know, I'm not saying something could happen, but it could head off something down the road, and that, you know, that is I don't know what the future might bring, but there's 4 of us that's up for re-election, and I don't know what we're gonna do, but 3 of you is gonna still be here when this school opens, and, you know, it'd be good just to say, hey, look, we were on top of this through this process. And, you know, I'm not saying something's going to happen. There's no conspiracy theories, but anytime you're dealing with construction and construction projects, I mean, it can happen. But that's just my thoughts on it.
I just had a couple of questions, and I see kind of all sides here a little bit. But Deborah, do you remember when we built Ellis? Did we do quarterly reports? Did we do monthly reports, or Cornatzer, or any of the schools, how we have done them in the past? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, because
I know we did not do monthly or quarterly reports. There was a much greater time span. I'd have to go back and look at the agendas from the board meetings, but we're not talking about as large a dollar amount as we are with this high school. And so,
Right.
no, there were not quarterly or monthly reports.
Well, and to follow up with that a little bit, you're the expert here. So if what Steve is asking for, is that a simple procedure? In other words, you're not reconciling anything, you're just basically showing invoices, correct? I mean, you're just printing out, well, here's what's come in, here's what's come in.
It's showing totals of applications for payment that we've received to date.
And what kind of, is that what kind of process does that involve? Just to produce that?
Oh, it's just reviewing the spreadsheet and then moving it into the format that we reported to you back in September.
Here, turn.
Ms. Smink, do you do that? I mean, is that done monthly, or is it just one time a month? And
I record every invoice that we receive as I receive them and send them over to the county.
as we receive them, or all at one time at a certain time of the month?
No, as we receive them.
Okay. So at the end of the month, how much trouble would it be for you to say, okay, in the month of October, I submitted, this is what I submitted, could you hit a button and enter and it print out?
Yes, I could do that.
Okay.
It's not going to reconcile with
yeah.
what the county
And I-
has, though.
And it's not gonna reconcile, but that's not what in my mind, that's not what I'm concerned about. I'm just wondering what we've submitted. Yeah.
So I get, go ahead, Ms.
No,
Lawler.
I just wanted to ask one more question on Steve. Are there months where we have none? No,
There, not at this point.
not at this point.
We, every month, we at least receive one invoice, a pay application from New Atlantic. And at this point, S&ME, about a half a dozen, maybe.
About a half a dozen? Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So I guess, my thought in all of it, if the board wants, something, bi-weekly, weekly, whatever, I think we need to do whatever the board wants, but, the consensus of the board. But I guess the thought was, this project's moving in a 24-month, theoretically, in a 24-month contract, it's gonna be moving just over 4% a month. So if you look at that against the whole, so you're moving at about 12, 15%, in a 90-day period. That's the movement that you see. Now, there's gonna be some times when you're gonna see a whole lot more movement, and there's gonna be other times you're gonna see a whole lot less movement. But at the end of the day, if it's, if it adds workload to the finance staff, that is my concern. But, if it's a matter of producing this non-reconciled document each month, and that's not a big deal, for my part, I'm okay with that. I guess my only concern is we sit here and we say that, it not reconciling with what the county comes up with on a 90-day basis is not a big deal. But we know how that works. And at the end of the day, if there are invoices that wind up being submitted, or being submitted, or the request is turned in, and it's on a little bit different, on a day different schedule than what the county's doing and all that, it's just gonna be impossible to reconcile that. But whatever the consensus of the board is, as far as my part, that's my concern with it. If the board wants information weekly, but it's just hard to reconcile that.
I'll agree, it is hard to reconcile, and that's why I say the 90-day is clean. It's what's been paid out. Everyone's on the same page, and it's there. It's clean, and it's there. And we know that we can visit anytime we want to. We know that if something's going to change, a work order comes through and we have to change it, there's going to be discussion. I just feel as though keep it as clean as possible, and to me, when it's paid out, that's when we should have the report.
Have any other comments? Do we, go ahead.
I obviously agree that 90 days for me is fine, but if someone, say Steve, would like to, he is totally capable to, or able to meet with Deborah and get that report. So just for information. Okay, so I just don't want, I don't know if this is something we're gonna vote on as far as what we're gonna do, but I'm fine with 90 days, but I don't want it to come across that I'm saying, I don't think you should be able to get that, that's not it at all, so.
This is not for me, this is for the people, yeah, that are gonna be paying the bills. And, and again, and I know the process was much different, and how it was handled in bonds versus cops and stuff like that, but we had a middle school that was gonna be $10 million, it ended up being $14 or $15 million. Now, I do realize it's a lot different situation, but again, at the end, Chad, this is your term, at the end of the day, if something does go wrong, and we can always say as a board, we were on top of this. Now, we don't have a reconciled report, but we did have a report of what was submitted, then, I'm not going to, maybe not get us completely out of the clear, but at least they can say, okay, we were on top of it. So, but, whatever. If somebody wants to make a motion, I'll second it and we'll move forward. And
I'm not necessarily looking for vote. If there's a consensus to do one way or the other, I'll be honest with you, I'm good with the professionals that we've got involved. That's where I'm at. But again, I'm not, to Wendy's point, if you want the information, you can get it anytime you ask. But to move on, what's the consensus of the board? If we want Deborah to produce the report, go ahead, Paul.
I started this idea in August or September. I sent each of you an email, and Steve's smartly heads up, we may be dealing with an open meetings law, so I got a comment individually from everyone except for Chad and Clint on their opinion about this thing. Had a real good meeting with Dr. Hartness, phone conversation. When was that? Yesterday? Answered several of the possible issues or questions that I could have. I thought that this would be a great way for us to step up and demonstrate what we said we were going to do. And the first meeting, the first report, Deborah, Dr. Hartness told me that you had just gotten that reconciliation thing back from the county, so it was, other than time, it was relatively easy to do it. At the end of each 90 days, if we're going to get a reconciliated report, it won't be 100% accurate because there may be I don't know what's the word that you just used. I was saying invoice, but that's not the right word.
Application.
Pay application that may have gone that way at the same time the reconciliation report comes this way. So it could still be a little bit out of whack even every 90 days. But I think if the community understands that we don't write the checks to pay for services and/or events, and if they wanted to, can anybody in the public contact the finance department and get any of this information? Okay. That may be, if you would say, oh, just make sure everybody knows, if they wanted to get this information, they can contact that department and get it at any time. If they want a reconciliated report from this board, it's either going to be quarterly or monthly, and I really don't care whether it's 90 days or 30 days. At first, when we first talked about this thing and you agreed, yeah, that's a good idea, let's get this information together and get it out. I was thinking monthly because we get a project manager report monthly, and the two would coincide and it would look good, and way to go, it's happening and it's doing good. Or, ooh, there's something a little bit out of whack, and it causes you to look and see the differences. That was my big point. It wasn't a slam, didn't want it to be confrontational at all, just wanted the public to be aware. Thank you. Chad, thank you for, I asked you to make a time in the agenda to put it, and so I thank you for doing that.
Commissioner, any other comments?
Just make sure I'm correct here, that we do not have a set date that we receive the payout request. Jim, am I right? So, because and remember that because you may want to speak to how often we may get one,
For
Jim.
example, this month's pay request has been delayed because a few of the design team members and myself questioned some of the amounts, percentages work complete. We thought that was a little bit high. So we asked the contractor to go back, look at those values, and confirm that so that pay application may be, this pay application may be 2 or 3 days away before finance gets it. And that's how it works. It's never the same day because next month, there may not be any questions. But our questions, what's called redlining that application, slows that process down.
And it may be that application may, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, that application may come back with different number too. And,
Yeah.
and all that's typical. That's all typical in this process. If a contractor thinks he's done 10% of the work this month, and the project manager and architect look at that and say, no, not quite, you've only done 8. We're gonna pay you for 8. That's typical.
Nothing unusual about that.
And that's the reason we have professionals.
So,
Well, I really appreciate that information and appreciate everybody's input here. It sounds to me as though if we can make it clear to the public, and I'm not so sure the public is aware totally that we are not the ones who are writing those checks every month, you know? But if we were to come out and say, the county's writing the checks, if you want access to the pay, whatever those things are called, you can call down anytime and get them, then that seems to cover that issue. But I like what Barbara has to say. It makes it a very clean report when you have a specific quarterly date that you know that you're going to address this.
I feel like I gotta say something. I'm fine with either way. I mean, I really am fine with either way. It's public information. To come out to the public and say what you're going, I mean, majority of the public just wants us to do our job, wants Jim to do his job, wants the contractor to do his job, and move on. So I'm fine with the quarterly, whatever span you do, the longer the span, the more accurate the data will be, or whatever it is. You could do it every week, but there's just so much carryover and all this stuff. So as long as it's no extra work per se, then I'm fine with it. If it turns into a thing to where now we're spending staff time answering to this report that is being produced and everything, then I'm gonna change my mind on that. Again, it's public information, but just if, it's those that trust, and those that don't. I don't care how much data you put out there and do it, but I'm fine. I'm fine either way.
Okay, so we're leaving the report, the reconciled report every 90 days. Is that what we're doing, or are we going a different route? All right, so we're leaving it with the 90-day reconciled report. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the discussion.
Mr. Chairman, so I'm hearing that we will pick every third board meeting, or quarterly, we're going to bring you a report at some date in time of when it is reconciled. At any point in time, if any of you or anybody in the public wants to see a pay application, an invoice, anything to do with the payment of this project, it will be available in my office or our finance office, or at the county if they have received it. They're all public record, so there's nothing behind that is private.
And I think that's a great point that you just added. I forgot about that. Does the county have a plan to report how they are issuing the checks? What is their plan? Because they're the ones who are writing the checks. How are they going to?
The county has a schedule in their finance department of when they issue and cut checks, and I don't know what
So
that schedule
we
is, so
don't
we don't
know.
supervise them, so.
But I'm assuming they have something in place at their board meetings where they're.
And they may be reporting from their finance department to
Right.
the county commission on a periodic basis. I don't know what that discussion has been. I have not had that discussion with the manager.
Okay,
Yeah, they may have like a capital expenditures
right.
report that they get whenever.
Thank you.
But again, just know, as far as the public is concerned, this information is available anytime it's requested. At this point, we're moving on to recognitions, and I will turn it over to Mr. Jeff Wallace for the United Way recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Board. It's my honor and the opportunity to say a few words about United Way tonight. And Pierce Group provided us and continues to provide us with 2 tickets to a Carolina Panthers game that, as an incentive to have people, our staff, to participate in the United Way campaign. And it's kind of funny that Stephanie walked into my office, and Stephanie and I worked together on the United Way campaign, and just so happens Pam Smith, that works with me, was standing there, and she goes, "What did I win? What did I win?" But she's always cutting up like that. But go ahead, Butch. Eddie, put that up there. And Stephanie goes, "Well, by the way, you did win something." So she almost jumped out of her skin. It couldn't have been a better person to win this because she loves football. And so she had the opportunity to go. If you show the next picture, please. So there's Pam and Judy Pryor, who also works in the HR department, at the Panther game. So the only complaint I have is, Deborah, you might want to share this with the Pierce Group, is that was last Sunday night, and about 8:30, neither one of them were at work on Monday morning. And so I had to call and check on them, make sure they wasn't still in Charlotte. But they had a great time, and we do appreciate people like Pierce Group for giving us this opportunity. At this time, I'd also like to recognize Melinda Beecham and Luke Petrapis. And Luke is a junior at Davie County High School and heavily involved with United Way, the student liaison. And Melinda will share some more information and some good news. And I will say that as you can see, our audience is pretty bare and our principals. So we have quite a few folks that are at the Ron Clark presentation tonight. And the winning school principal and assistant principal is there as well. But you can still acknowledge them and share their numbers tonight, if you will. All right, Melinda.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. As one of the first things I always have to do, and you guys who have seen me do this for a few years, you will be ready for this. I have to thank the Davie County School System for helping me to raise 3 wonderful children. And it wasn't always easy, was it, Barbara? But we did it, and we did it together, and it is such a cool thing. You helped me raise a probation and parole officer in Mecklenburg County. He may as well be in Iraq, as far as I'm concerned. You know? But he's in Mecklenburg County. You helped me to raise a young gentleman who's in nanotechnologies. And you helped me to raise a daughter who has a PhD in brain cancer research, which she has turned out not to be happy with, Barbara. And she's going to dental school. So you instilled in my children, especially my daughter, a love of education, obviously. And I just always have to thank you for that. I also want to recognize tonight and thank Jeff Wallace and Wendy Horn, who are the co-campaign chairs this year for the United Way campaign and have just done an extremely wonderful job, and we just appreciate them both so much. And I recognize Luke as our student liaison. And I thank Davie High School for the relationship that United Way has with the high school in particular and with our football team. So we have that United Way football team War Eagle relationship, a lot like the United Way and the NFL. So it's pretty cool, and each year, we always get one of these gentlemen to help us by being the student liaison. And this year, we're just so pleased that it is Luke. What a great student, good football player. So who knows, maybe Panthers or something, you know, you never know. United Way campaign. Wow. The school system, well, I just got chills all over. You know, the school system overall did an incredible job with their campaign. A 12.5% increase. That kind of support, guys, you know, I can't buy it. $29,634 from your campaign. That buys a lot of services in this county. That buys a lot of services for 1 out of 3 residents that the United Way in our agency serves. So I hope you are very proud of that. But the outstanding school in your campaign had is incredible, a 200% increase over last year. Over $3,500 this year from South Davie Middle School. Outstanding. What support? And we wanted to, and Luke is here to present that plaque. We'd like to present it to somebody. Who should it be, Mr. Wallace? To Wendy. Wendy, would you please come forward? We would like to present this plaque to South Davie Middle School and present it to Wendy and to thank you once again for all you do for this community and all that you do for United Way. You make a real difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda and Luke. We appreciate you being here, and thank you for everything that United Way does for Davie County. We appreciate that. At this time, we're moving on to the consent agenda, and I will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, before you have that motion, I would remind the board that there is an addendum to the personnel recommendation list that's attached, and it was attached this afternoon. It came in today. So we have a motion by Ms. Horn. Do we have a second? We have a second by Mr. Drexler. All in favor? Motion carries 7-0. This time we're moving on to our business items, and the first item on the agenda is a budget resolution for fiscal year 2015-16. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Hartness and Ms. Smink. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ms. Smink may jump in here at any point in time, but we have before you a budget resolution, our final budget resolution for the year now that we do have a budget from the state. We've talked about previously the changes in the state budget. What I want to do tonight is just take just a few minutes, and I have added some supporting documents to your agenda item to help explain where we are. And Savannah has copies of those, so if you don't see them on your iPad, we're going to go ahead and pass those around. We can take one and pass it this way, Savannah. So before we begin talking about where we are with the budget and the adjustments to the budget, I want to just review where we have been. And one of the things I want to highlight is back in May, when we made our presentation to the Board of County Commissioners, we made a budget request of an increased request of $945,000 in our local current expense allocation. We received $775,000 of that request. And I want to say how thankful we all should be for our commissioners stepping up and helping us with that adjustment to our local current expense. If it would not have been for this group of commissioners that adopted this, we would have been forced to have significant layoffs this year. So we've already discussed how the state budget unfolded. And now that we have our allotments, our finance staff has pulled together and put together a final draft for your consideration tonight. But I want to go through and just talk about a few things. And you have one handout that's colorful. If you'll take that one that has orange across the top, and I'm going to pull that up on the screen as well so that we can look at it together. This is a state public school fund allotment analysis. This is a comparison of the 2015-16 initial allotment with the 2014-15 initial allotment. And what you have to know about this analysis is this is apples to apples. It's a point-in-time comparison of the PRCs that are listed there. Know that there are PRCs in the state public school fund that are not listed here, that are not part of the initial allotment. Also know that some of these PRCs are only funded to 80% at this point in time and come in later. I asked Deborah today, I said, Deborah, how many revisions do you get? Because we have budget amendments every month that we bring to you. How many revisions to the initial allotment did you get last school year? Does anybody have a guess? 50. There were 50 revisions to the state allotment from the time we first received it until the last one, which was after the closeout of the year, and they had to open back up the year to make the change. So there are adjustments to this throughout the period of time in a fiscal year, but this gives you a point in time that's the same point in time or this, from this year to last year. Let's look at this so we can better understand how the state provides money to our school district, and I've shared some of these things before, but these are real numbers. So if you look at the top of this spreadsheet, you'll see that we have allotments that come to us in what we call buckets of positions or months of employment. And if you look at the blue column, which is last year, versus the light orange column, which is this year, you'll see that this year the state puts a dollar value on that position and months of employment allotment of $23,125,499. Last year, the state gave us $23,048,891. That's not the actual number that'll come to Davie County. That's based on the average salaries across the state, and it will be adjusted throughout the year based on our employees and their actual salaries. But this gives you an idea of comparing. The state gives you a number at the beginning of the year based on those positions. And what happens typically, and you'll see this in the media, is that we'll see some comparison that the state gave public schools more money this year or less money this year. And one might look at this and say, yes, the state of North Carolina gave Davie County Schools $76,608 more this year than last year in position and months of employment allotment. That'd be a true statement. But what you would have to do is get the rest of the story, and the rest of the story is in the last column on the right. And you'll see that that increase in dollar allotment associated with the state allotment also is minus 2.77 teaching positions, minus an instructional support position, and minus 14 months of employment. So what we get from that is a clear picture that it costs more money this year to employ fewer people. Our adjustment was changed based on, we had a few fewer students this year. If you look at the ADM up there, it's 641 last year, it's 6345 this year. So those adjustments in the classroom teacher allotment, they're based on our enrollment. So some of that was based on that, period. But what I don't want you to think and the public to think is, okay, we got an increase in funding, but we actually got fewer positions, because it costs more this year to employ people than it did last year, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. If you look on down, the one line that's PRC 031 low wealth, you'll notice a negative 165,666. That was a little surprise to us this year, and not a pleasant surprise. That is the state low wealth fund, and we were reduced $165,666 with no notice. And I'm going to talk about why that is in a few minutes. So when you look at this, it kind of gives you an idea of what the state allotment looks like. And overall, the number is pretty flat, but the number of people we can employ is fewer based on those state dollars. So that's why we become, that's why we are where we are. Why is the reason that it costs more this year to employ our folks? I have another document that I've shared with you, and at the top of it, it says 2015-16 budget discussion. And that's here. So let's just go down through and it'll kind of help explain why it costs more to employ staff this year than last year. The salary increase in the state budget, teachers who are on the A0 to A4 scale, that's our beginning teachers, had a $2,000 salary increase. There was a salary increase for teachers who moved from steps 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25. They received a salary increase. The local supplements that go along with those salaries increase because they're based on a percentage. All of our full-time employees will receive a $750 bonus in December. Benefits, retirement contributions increased from 15.21 to 15.32%. Employer contributions to health care increased by $93 per employee. So when you put in the salary increases, the bonuses, the benefit increases, and the decrease in low wealth funding, that creates a gap that we've got to address, and we have to address in this budget. So when you put those things in place and plug it into our budget and the number of people we have employed, which is not increasing, then we had to make some adjustments. So we'll go back, and tonight Mike will be here presenting our audit report, and you will see in the audit report that last year you appropriated $775,000 in fund balance. The audit report will show that we only used $586,427 of that, so we did not use all of the fund balance that was appropriated. But when you add up the salary increases, the bonuses, the change in retirement contribution and benefits, and the low wealth funding decrease, we're going to need to appropriate some fund balance this year as a temporary measure to get us through the remainder of this year. And that's really the only choice we have in the middle of a school year unless you were to lay folks off. And that's what every other school district is in the middle of doing. So what we're recommending in this budget resolution is that the board appropriate $488,500 in fund balance as a temporary measure, and during the remainder of this school year that the staff look for ways to reduce cost. And that means we're going to be looking at positions not to fill and other measures as well to make up that difference between now and the end of the school year. That's the choice that we have, other than doing some type of reduction in force in the middle of the school year. So we're looking at vacancies and addressing this shortfall that was presented to us over things we don't have control over as a temporary measure. On this page as well, you will see the low wealth funding, and then you see the current expense fund balance. At the end of June, your audit report will show that your current expense fund balance is $1,539,769. So that's where we ended up with fund balance at the end of this year. Let's talk about this low wealth funding. For the past 5 years, you'll see on this one page that we've averaged getting about $400,000 to $430,000 in low wealth funding. That's been used for instructional support positions, supplies and materials, things like that. Let's talk about the low wealth fund and what that means. The low wealth fund was established in North Carolina. It's been around some time, and it's to help counties supplement their ability to pay local current expense. And it is a 3-page calculation. You can go and look at it on the state website, and it takes several things into account. To be eligible, school districts are in counties where the calculated county wealth is less than 100% of the state average. That means you're low wealth. You're below the state average in calculated county wealth. The 3-page formula takes into account the anticipated tax revenue for each county in North Carolina, the tax base, and the county's per capita income. And it factors those 3 things. Each has a certain percentage in the formula. So due to the increase in the county's adjusted tax base over time, and you can see that in the formula as well, the anticipated revenue available for public schools in Davie County, according to the calculation in the formula, we saw this reduction because that number has gone up. Our county's revenue availability has moved from 92% of the state average to 99.57% of the state average. So when the county wealth reaches 100, and that's just one factor, but when it reaches 100, we're like at 97% right now, then low wealth funding just completely goes away. There's no hold harmless, there's no, reduction over time, it just goes away. And we're one of those counties kind of at the bottom of that list. So as our county's wealth increases, we have a possibility of losing access to the low wealth funding. It's not based on our county's taxing effort or their effort to provide funding for public schools. It's based merely on our county's wealth. And it's a long formula. Be glad to sit down and show you that and where the numbers came from, because I ask a lot of questions about it to better understand it myself. There's really no way to accurately predict what that looks like in the future, because it all depends on the tax base and the wealth of counties, the other 99 counties in the state. But I just want to give you that heads up that there's a possibility that that funding could go away as our county's wealth increases. And we've had good news in Davie County, so it's a good problem to have. But it also affects state funding for public schools in this county as well. So I think the last thing I want to show you is a document we've looked at before, and it's this big old spreadsheet. And since we last looked at this, I have added 2014-15, and I've added a couple things that Paul had asked about previously, which is ADM for each fiscal year, as well as reduction in staff each fiscal year. I know this is hard to see if you're just looking at the page. It's probably better if you looked at this one online at some point and zoomed in. But what this does is compare our expenditures from 2008-9 to 2014-15. And this is all available data on the NCDPI website. This does not come from our audit report. It comes straight from DPI. And it outlines salaries, benefits, services, supplies, and equipment, state, federal, and local funds for each of these fiscal years. So if you look across there, you just look at 2008-9, you can see that the state provided $36.8 million. There was $4 million in federal, $11 million in local. You go down and you look at the next year, and then you look at 2011, that's when the stimulus money came in, and the state funding decreased. So the state used the federal money to fill in the gap during those years. If you look over to the side, I provided a little summary here of salaries and benefits, and you can kind of see how that changes over time. What doesn't change is the percent of our budget that goes towards salaries and benefits. It's staying right around 86%. So as our population has changed, as funding has changed, our percentage of our budget for salaries and benefits for people has stayed constant throughout this whole time. So you go on down and you can see. What you will see, though, is a summary at the bottom of the page, and I think this is the telling story. Between 2008-9 and 2014-15, we have an increase in our total budget of $2.195 million. See that number at the very bottom there? That's how much more money we have in Davie County than we had in 08-09 in all of our allotments together. When you break that down, the difference between 08-09 and 2014-15, we're now paying $3.2 million more in employee benefits than we were in 08-09. And we're paying out $1.2 million less in salaries. So what you gather from that is, yes, funding has increased over that period of time, but we're employing fewer people, and it's costing us more to employ the people that we have. During that period of time, I summarized at the bottom too, we had a reduction in ADM of 329 students. So that accounts for some reduction in state funding, of course, but we also had a reduction of 82 positions. So when you look at this thing as a whole picture, we're spending our money on the same things we spent it on in 08-09, the same percentage, but it's costing us more each year to employ the staff that we employ. The state has increased funding for public education over the last 5 years. That is a fact. The state has not kept up with the requirements within legislative law of benefits healthcare, and all the other things, and the salary increases that have been enacted by the state. They have not kept up with that so that we could employ the same amount of people per student. Are we going to employ fewer people because we have fewer students? Yes, we would. But we wouldn't have as reduced as much as we have. It's hard to say. You know what I mean? The ratio of 82 employees for 329 students is not where it needs to be. So I hope that helps explain where we are in funding and some of the myths that are out there that are inaccurate in the media. I mean, there are people who are saying, you know, the legislature hasn't increased funding. Yes, they have increased funding over this amount of time. Has it been to the level to maintain the staffing that we've had in the past? No, it hasn't. So there's always more to the story than what's on the street or what's on the news, and I wanted you to be able to understand that. So, Mr. Chairman, we have your draft budget. We have a budget resolution before you for action tonight. That budget resolution does require action by the board, knowing that the fund balance that we requested to appropriate along with that budget resolution is not a fund balance we count on using all of during this school year. And I would be glad to entertain any questions or comments or concerns by the board.
Can you repeat what you just said, just the tail end of your
I'll
presentation?
I'll try. You have a budget resolution before you tonight for action, requires action, that we adopt a budget. In that budget resolution is a request to appropriate $488,500 in fund balance, and it's in the resolution, you'll see. And we are considering that to be a temporary measure to get us through the remainder of the school year. We have no intention of spending all of that fund balance between now and the end of the fiscal year. Does that make sense?
Here's my question, and I'm glad I wasn't listening. Maybe I wasn't listening, I don't know what, but I'm glad you repeated the $488,500 of fund balance, because now, if I understand this correctly, we finished the 14-15 year with $1.539 million in fund balance.
That's correct.
So we're going to draw it down another $488,000.
To balance a budget, if we
If
used
use
every
it.
bit of it, that's
If
correct.
we use every bit of it. Okay, here's my question is, we adopted a fund balance policy that basically said that we had to put some type of plan in place to replace this money. And, you know, I guess this may be 2 years in a row that we've done this, and I don't know that maybe have we put a plan in place? Do we have a plan in place to replace this money? I mean, I guess I know a couple of years ago when I wanted to take some of the fund balance policy and fund the teacher assistants for an additional year for them to plan, and that, you know, we didn't do it then because we didn't have because of our fund balance policy and the fact that we did not have a plan in place to replenish that. And so, you know, I guess my concern is if eventually we're going to run out of fund balance. I mean, I think the word that was used when I talked about using that 400-some thousand for teacher assistants, it was unsustainable. Well, this is unsustainable. And I think you guys realize that, or you folks realize that. So I just wondered if we got anything in place, and we have a policy that says that we got to have so much in fund balance. And if we draw down below that amount, we got to have a plan in place to do it, whether it be over a 2-week period or a 2-year period. And
I'd be glad to address that.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm thankful that we have a fund balance policy and we have fund balance available in times when the state legislature approves a budget in October, because otherwise you would have a reduction in force in the middle of a school year that would be significantly disruptive. One of the things that I want to make clear is we don't have an intention of using this fund balance, but the law requires that we approve a balanced budget. Do we have a plan that replenishes this fund balance? The only plan that we have, because the only revenue source that we have is state, federal, and local, would be through our local county commissioners. They have been generous this past year in providing an additional $775,000. We have two choices. We can request additional funding from the commissioners during this next budget cycle, or we can continue to reduce staff. Because you're correct, you cannot continue to use fund balance on a yearly basis to balance a budget. So those are really our only two choices, is to request additional funding. But what I would encourage the board to think about too is, as your fund balance policy is based on a percentage of your local allotment. Does the board, thank goodness again that we have this policy, and we had a couple $1 million in place, and it was up above $4 million at one time when the federal stimulus money came along. Is that the appropriate percentage, or is there an amount the board feels like that we should never go below in fund balance? That's a policy question I think that you all ought to consider. There are some in the community who a couple years ago said we shouldn't have a fund balance, period. If we would not have had a fund balance and the legislature would have enacted the budget in October, then we would have had no choice. So I think we've got to figure out as a school system and you as a board, what do you want our policy to be? Is it to restore to the 17% and 1% stabilization? Is it not to go below a certain dollar value? But I strongly believe we need to maintain a fund balance for times like this when we have no control over what the state does. So I don't have a firm question for you, Mr. Ryder. I think it's a great question. But I think the board needs to discuss that and consider it in the future.
And I agree that we do need a fund balance, and, because just for what you said, it's essential that we have, you take the end of the school year or stuff like that, when stuff, we gotta have something to operate on when the revenues are not coming in.
Right.
But, and that does make sense, but I'm just concerned about, that have we broken this fund balance policy without having some type of plan in place? I'm fine with the budget, and, and I'm gonna vote yes on the budget, but I just have that concern.
I think that's a great question, Steve, and forgive me if I'm getting the pots of money mixed up, but at one time, did we not say that we had to have 2 months operating expenses in our fund balance?
The state does not have a policy for school systems and the amount of money that they have to keep in their fund balance.
I know the state didn't have a policy, but I thought Davie County Schools had a policy at some point, and it may have just been, that's what we did, just because that was wise use of dollars, but for some reason I thought we did.
I think the county is required to have a fund balance, and I don't know, is it 1 month or 2 months, 8% or?
I think 8%. Yeah, I think it is 8%.
So,
For county government.
and I think what we done was basically modeled our policy from that and basically just doubled it. Instead of 1 month, we said 2 months. Of course, now as our local budgets went up, then that
The
number
requirements
went
going
up.
up.
So
That's
it's
right.
actually it was one time somewhere around $1.9 million. It's higher than that now, so, but anyway.
And to your point, Steve, adjusting our policy so that it meets the new number is not the quote-unquote answer. You know what I'm saying? As far as just because our policy is out, your point is whether this is right or $2 million is right or whatever it is, it's still, if we keep having to use it every year, there's going to be a problem. And yeah, to your point, we don't have any way of, I don't know, it's a problem. And again, to your point too, getting a budget in October, wow, what are you supposed to do?
Well, to me, this is a place where you use fund balance.
Right.
This
No,
is where
definitely.
here we're in a situation where we've got people in the classroom, and you've got people engaged with kids that's it in July or June.
But if we're not careful, it'll be, next
That's
year
right.
it'll be the
There's
same,
no
because
question
there's a
about
track record there. And so,
There's no-
do we, and I'm like Steve, let's, we can move on with this year and do this, but God, next year, there's a track record.
Mm-hmm.
And to maybe assume that it's going to be different is maybe not very,
my point was not, I wasn't saying do not use the fund balance.
No,
I was
I
saying,
am, absolutely.
okay, our policy says we gotta have a plan to replenish
right.
it.
That's
And
right.
we don't have a plan to replenish it other than asking them.
Right.
And when, I hate to use the term the county commissioners for the money because they don't give it to us, the people give it to us.
That's right,
So-
absolutely.
So, and it's coming from the people, so,
So it sounds like to me, what Dr. Hartness is proposing is to balance the budget, we're appropriating 48.5, and through the rest of this year, they're gonna work to try to find some, close some gaps, either with resignations or with, folks retiring and that sort of thing, to try to draw that number down and not use all that money to start off with. And then, I think we have to your point, Steve, you had to go back and continue to ask the people, and we're included in that as well, for more money. But at some point, the state is continuing clearly to draw funds. How they have provided more funds than last year. If you look at what that buys, these funds are not buying as much as they did. And that's the issue here. And, there's a place where you have to decide whether we're okay with, we had to be very careful with the quality of education from my perspective. That's all I'm saying. So at some point, we have to communicate that message to the county commissioners and explain the position that we're in. And at some point, hopefully, we can work with them to help build our fund balance back. Or, again, continue to cut staff through attrition and resignations.
It really saddens me that, it seems like every year, and this has been my 8th year sitting here, we are so creative of how to keep our staff with our children. And we have used this method for years. It saddens me that we are not adding positions. And I hope that the public remembers this and speaks to our state legislators and say, we're doing better than you could think we're doing with the less people, but that line is getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And I applaud the staff for working so hard to keep the people in the classroom, but it does concern me that each year the cost goes up, the money is not balancing.
And I would speak to that, Barbara, as well. If you look at, it speaks to the quality of the staff. That's what it does. Everybody's doing more. The load is being piled on. If you look at, I was just doing some quick math here a few minutes ago, the 329 student reduction, if you look at that against the 82 position reduction, if you said that one teacher had 25 students, that's a reduction of 13 to 14 positions, not 82. So there's a lot of people doing a lot more work. So that's just, to your point, it speaks to the quality of the staff. Do you have any other comments?
So the amount that you were saying that we would take from fund balance was roughly 488. To Steve's point, as far as how the money's going to be replaced, you said that we have no intention of using that. Have you all run some preliminary number? Because this is just to balance. So do you have any idea what realistically out of that 488 will probably have to be used, what can be put back?
We don't have any way of knowing or predicting attrition between now and the end of the school year, but we're looking at every position as they come open. There are some that we're currently leaving unfilled that will bridge that gap. And we're looking at contracted services. We're looking at everything that we do to try to bridge that gap. I don't know any other way. I think it has to be a combination of things. If we want to sustain the public school system that we have in North Carolina and in Davie County, it's going to require more funding every year to maintain the same number of people with children. And we've seen a trend in our state of the state legislature in more than just public school funding, putting more responsibility back on local communities. So as that changes over time, we have to make a value judgment. And the legislature has to make a value judgment. What do we value most? What is our priority? And I think we have a wonderful school system here. And as hard as it is to talk about low wealth funding going away, not to be a low wealth district, to have the means in our community to fund public education at the level we're funding it now and the capability, you know, it's what we own. We own it as taxpayers. I'm a taxpayer, you're a taxpayer. And it depends on what our priorities are as to how this public school system goes forward.
Have any other comments?
I just want to make sure I have this clear. You stated at the beginning, Dr. Hartness, that last year when we took money from fund balance, we did not use it all. So, and you're not anticipating using all of this either. So that's what I kind of wanted to make sure that I did hear that. And I think that was all the questions that I had about that. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I will ask for a vote or call for a motion. I apologize. Motion to adopt the fiscal year 15-16 state public school budget, local current expense budget, fund budget, federal grants fund, child nutrition, and other special revenue fund budget resolution as it's presented. Do we have a motion? We have a motion by Ms. Owens. Do we have a second? We have a second by Ms. Horn. Do we have any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Motion carries 7-0. This time, we're moving on to the next business item on our agenda. It's the 2015-16 DPI Facilities Needs Survey, and I'll call on Mr. Wallace to talk to us about that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board, you can see pretty much the explanation there in your packet. It's a study that's required by DPI, a facility needs survey that we have to put together, and Michael Spielman is there at the podium, who did a fabulous job at putting this information together. And it asked us to look at 5 to 10 years, and I will be glad to answer any questions. I don't know if I need to go through it with you. I'll be glad to.
This survey is required by the state,
Yes, sir.
how, every 5 years?
Yes.
So you've gone through this process before, but I have not, so I'm asking for a little more information so I understand completely what it says.
Dressler, there we go. We get this program or this spreadsheet is set up for us just to put in numbers. And also DPI will draw their own numbers down. And we go back and forth to make sure that we're all on the same page. And for instance, one ADM, we base our ADM on the 20 days, month 1, 20 days. The information that they gathered was on PMR month number 8, month 8, which is a little bit different. So which, just an explanation of why that's why there could be a little difference in when you see ADM. And I apologize that the reports, part of it's landscape, part of it's up. I know, Steve, you're right. I'm sitting over here trying to turn mine as well.
And I'll just make a comment, just observation. You guys used the facilities needs study from Little Architecture that they
Yes.
did for us.
Yes, sir, up to 2022.
Okay.
Now, but our records go on up to 25. We've planned that far in advance with roofing projects, HVAC projects, and that sort of thing. And so all those are figured into these numbers.
Okay.
With the facilities needs.
One note, Mr. Chairman, as you can see, at the end of the report that you have, that this, once acted on by this board, it has to be acted on by the commissioners as well.
Do we have any questions, or Mr. Spillman or Mr. Wallace? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to approve this facilities needs study as it's presented. Have a motion by Mr. Junker. Do we have a second? Have a second by Mr. Drexler. Do we have any other comment, any other question? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Spillman and Mr. Wallace. And I'll call on Mr. Wallace and Mr. Spillman again to talk to us about our solid waste
Yes,
management
sir.
contract.
As indicated there, our solid waste disposal contract with Waste Industries will end in January. So Mr. Spillman sent this information out for bid and provided a spreadsheet there that hopefully you can some understand there of what the different numbers mean. But bottom line, we're paying approximately $70,000 now. Michael's done some negotiating, and Republic Services came in, as you see, the low bid, which is local. And this contract, we're asking for to authorize staff to enter into a contract for $67,367.40. Michael and I will be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
I've got one quick question. Currently, the contract is with Waste Industries.
That's correct.
Okay, and they're,
Expires in January, yes.
they wanted to go up quite a bit.
Yes.
Yeah, they told Michael that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they went up more than they anticipated they
Right.
would when they started running the numbers. So.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions, comments?
How often do we, how long is this contract for?
36 months.
Okay.
With the option to renew for 2 years at the same price.
Yeah.
Because our last one was 5 years.
Yeah.
So we did it for 36.
Yeah, I know, the reason I asked that, I know our church was paying $200 a month, so we was gonna move it, and guess what? They came down to $100 a month.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
no, it's,
So, anyway,
Amazing.
I didn't know if it was, how often we negotiated the contract.
okay, seeing no other questions, comments, I will call for a motion to authorize the staff to enter into a contract for the waste disposal with Republic Waste in the amount of $67,367.40. Do we have a motion? We have a motion by Mr. Drexler. Do we have a second? We have a second by Ms. Livengood. Any other comments, questions? All in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spillman. At this time, we're moving on to our special report, our audit report, and I will call on Mr. Michael White to come forward.
Chairman Fuller, members of the board, Dr. Hartnett is pleased to be here tonight to present to you the audit report for Davie County Schools. This is for the year ending June 30th, 2015. The first thing I want to do is just comment on the excellent presentation Dr. Hartnett's had on the budget. I think if he ever wants to get out of the education profession, he would probably have a position with the firm in auditing here.
Can you turn that mic off?
Yeah, did a really good job of explaining where the system is at. And our firm, about all we do is audit school boards, so it's just spot on with what we're seeing throughout the state. But I'm not going to go through the entire bound report that y'all have in front of you, the financial statements. I do want to point out on here that we've got it marked draft on these financial statements. The reason we marked it draft was solely because the budget was not passed, which y'all just passed a few moments ago prior to us preparing the report. We didn't want to publish the report, and then if that appropriated fund balance numbers changed, then it would not be accurate. So it's a draft. Actually, it's exactly what the final copy is in front of you now, though. But the first thing I was going to point out, on page 1 is probably the most important part of the report. This is our auditor's opinion on the financial statements. and pleased to report that it was an unmodified opinion. And what that means is there were no items that would cause us to modify our report, essentially saying everything was good except for this modification. So that means everything was in accordance with the accounting standards. It's the highest level of assurance that we can give on a set of financial statements as your independent auditors, and it's really commonly referred to as a clean audit report. That's what people typically look at that as. Then I'm just going to briefly skip over and look at the financial statements, actually numbers portion. And one thing I always want to tell the districts is on page 11 and on pages 12 and 13, that's going to be your first balance sheet and your first income statement. And on these statements, it includes your fixed assets of the school board. And I always tell everyone, don't look down at the bottom number and see this total net position and think you've got $33 million of fund balance. Because it does include your fixed assets. You're not going to go out and liquidate your school buildings to fund current year operations. These statements are really used more so for cities and counties who may go out for debt issuances, and the fixed assets are indeed relevant to Moody's and Standard & Poor's. Schools in North Carolina, you have no way to issue debt. You can't go out and do that, so there's no real significance to the rating agencies on that. What I really want to point out to you, and like I said, Dr. Hartness did a very good job on this. I'm just going to skip over to page 16. This is going to be your income statement on the fund basis, which is the traditional basis that I would think that the school board would manage off of. On the left-hand column, you're going to see the general fund. And I'm just going to go straight to the bottom and look at the bottom line. It shows that you did indeed use $586,000 of fund balance, the third number up from the bottom, which reduced the fund balance from a beginning amount of 2.1 down to 1.5, as y'all have already discussed. And I think everyone here is aware you can't continue to lose at that pace, have to stop something, but the state legislature really did the schools no favor this year. I mean, we've got some districts who are really in tight shape right now because they've hired for what they thought was going to come in on the budget. It came in less. What do? Like Dr. Hartness said, you going to terminate people now, or are you just going to carry it on through the next year? And that's why you've got to have that fund balance. Just will tell you one thing, since you were discussing the fund balance, we do have one district that was very tight on the fund balance, and the state came in and told them that they need to have X amount of fund balance. And what the state told them was 1 month's worth of fund balance in the general fund. Now, I've never really heard the state say that to anyone before on a school district, and it was really just on this one specific school district who are communicating it to. But the point of the whole story is, from our perspective as an auditor, I'm going to be ultra conservative just from our nature, that's only looking at the general fund expenditures. Your real problem would be cuts in the federal and state monies. That's what you've really got to build that fund balance up, because most likely your county is not going to cut funds drastically. You're not going to have huge cuts like the state or federal government could do to you and really put you in tight situations. So just want to point that out to everyone. Then the other thing I want to point out that I think is worth mentioning to you, again, I don't want to take all of your time, but I'm just going to go over on the school food service fund, and what I want to look at is going to be on page 25. This is the cash flow statement for your school food service fund. And what that shows is again, looking at the bottom numbers, what we're going to look at, you've got $460,000 of cash on the school food service fund at 6/30/15. That was a decrease of $350,000 from the previous year. At the end of last year, you had $816,000. We used $356 in cash. We've got $460 now. What we're seeing throughout the state on districts this size, it's getting tougher and tougher for the school food service fund to be self-supportive. Just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. I know the program here, and they've taken some measures to try to increase some revenue with some alternative methods and trying to make cuts whenever you can. But we're just seeing that more and more on the districts throughout the state, that when it gets to a certain point, if that trend continues, then where does the money come from? You've got to pay for lunches for the students, so that would be another drain out of your general fund. So, and we are seeing that in some districts through the state. You're not there yet, but again, it's just something to focus on going forward. And then I'm going to skip over sort of towards the back of the report, and I'm going to go over to page 58. And this is where we start our compliance and internal control portion of the report. And believe it or not, pages 58 through the last page of the report, page 70, it's just a few pages there compared to the first 60 pages, but it easily takes over half of our time. What we're doing here is we're looking at the internal controls of the district and the compliance with federal and state laws. And when we say internal controls, we're looking at the internal controls to make sure there's not weaknesses within the district where fraud could easily occur, or a financial statement transaction would be inappropriate and therefore misstate the financial statements. And also the internal controls to make sure that the district is indeed in compliance with applicable federal and state laws on how you spend the monies. And there's 3 reports that we have here starting at page 58, opinions that we're issuing on the statements. One is on the overall internal control structure of the district. One is on the compliance with federal monies that the district receives. And one is on compliance with the state monies that the district receives. And all 3 of those reports were unmodified opinions, meaning there were no issues whatsoever, a clean report on those. There were no findings reported. A finding would be something where there would be a violation of a applicable federal or state law or a significant weakness in your internal control structure. We noted no items such as that we would have to report to the district. So pleased to report that as well. Then in addition, you've got a 2-page letter, and I'm not going to go over this in detail, but this is a required communications letter that we, as your independent CPAs, are required to communicate to the governing board. The main thing here is it essentially states if we would have had any difficulties in dealing with anyone at the school board, any disagreements with management, just any real issues, we would report that here. And very pleased to report that we did not have any issues dealing with anyone. We talk to people at the individual schools, go out to those, child nutrition program, Title I, exceptional children, obviously everyone in the finance department. And whenever we ask for the information, we feel that we've given full access to any of the information that we're asking for, and that's really what we like to see. If we feel we're not getting the whole story, then we're going to dig in a lot harder, and things just don't feel right. But definitely not the case here. Everything is very open to us. We get full responses to any inquiries that we have, so we're very appreciative of that. Does anyone have any questions for me whatsoever about these statements? I think you may have had them for a little while.
Thank you for your presentation, and Dr. Hartness, your sheets that you had up there and handed us paper-clipped answered a couple of my questions. Can you explain to me what required supplemental information, what was that speaking to?
That is an accounting term that they use. It's required schedules that we are required by the accounting standards to put in the financial statements. I think that's really just it's just required by the accounting standards boards about the schedule that we are required to put in.
Okay. On page 36, if you would, at the last paragraph, I believe it is. I'm just going to go through where I noticed something that I didn't understand, so I'm asking so that I do understand.
No problem at all.
Bottom of 36. Yeah, last paragraph. The STIF is unrated and has a weighted average maturity of 1.5 years as of June 30. Then the last sentence, it says the board has no policy for managing interest rate risk or credit risk. Are we supposed to have a policy?
No, I'll tell you, I knew whenever you told me that page what your question was going to be, to be honest. Our firm audits 40 of the 115 districts in the state. None of those 40 have such a policy. This is a disclosure that's required, again, by our accounting standards. What it really relates to, if you remember back years ago in Orange County out in California, they had some real issues in investing with derivative financial instruments. If you're investing in things like that, you need to have a policy about how you're going to invest in items. The good or bad thing, you can look at it from North Carolina. You have no way of investing in any of those items. You're so restricted on what you can invest in. Why would anybody have a policy? Because the state tells you what you can do anyways.
Somewhere else in there, I was reading that there is a thing called a North Carolina School Board Trust.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'd answered my own question, but I wanted to make sure.
You're exactly right. And we get those questions occasionally, because it does sort of look odd when somebody reads that, should we have that policy? But North Carolina is just so restrictive, very conservative, but you're not going to read about any of the districts in North Carolina having issues with losses on derivatives.
Last comment is, thank you for knowing what you know how to do. That's a bunch of stuff. Deborah, you and the staff for supplying the information that they needed to get to this. There was, for anybody that doesn't know, multiple times did you congratulate the staff here for doing what they needed to do to get the information so that you could do what you needed to do.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. White? Thank you. We really appreciate it. And I want to thank Ms. Smink and her team and everybody at the schools and administrative levels that have worked with Mr. White and provided the information. We really appreciate that. We know it's a lot of hard work. Thank you.
I just want to echo that, Chad. I just think we are so fortunate, Deborah, to have you and your team and everyone in our administrative offices, for that matter, that helped us. But, I mean, you know, it's amazing. When I look at all this, to me, obviously, it's kind of, whew. But the fact that to have such a clean report, I just want to commend you for that and thank you for that.
Which should make the community feel good, too. It's you know, you have report after report that everybody's doing their job, and it makes me feel good, anyway. So at this time, we're moving on to public address to the board, and I will turn it over to Ms. Wilson.
Board members, this is the moment we've been waiting for. I am delighted to say that we have an audience member who would like to address you, and I would like to invite Eddie Liggins up to address the board, please. He will be our only speaker, so when he is finished, my role is done.
Folks, I too am a product of Davie County School System, finished in Davie High. Well, my math's not very good, but a couple of years back. And a lot of times people come to this podium making demands of y'all, telling you where you, pointing out your mistakes. Y'all been through all of that. But folks, I'm just coming tonight to say thank you for the excellent job that all of you are doing. It's been very enlightening tonight to know all that go into the budget process and all of that, and all the leadership that you folks are exhibiting. And of course, you're hearing different things on the street and everything. And how much time do I have for what? I'll try to fill up the whole time. Could you slow that thing down? Anyway, hear things out on the street, read in the paper about all the positives going on in the school system. Some of the bad numbers are getting lower, dropouts and all of that, which I think is very good. That's excuse me, something everybody can be proud of. And when any one person in the school system gets positive recognition, that is a reflection on all of you. And I hope that you do take that. I know Dr. Hartness has been out front there in the superintendent's role, getting some accolades there. A lot of other people have, but it is a team effort. And I, for one, out in the community, certainly appreciate that. And I was hoping, what was Mr. Warford? I was going to brag on that crew up there building the high school. I live about 3 miles from there. And maybe it's the time that I'm going up and down the road, Farmington Road. I am yet to have to dodge a bunch of mud out on Farmington Road. They're doing a great job. I've never seen a construction site where you don't have all this mud coming out on the road. They're doing a great job keeping it hid somewhere back in there or loading it on the dump truck, whatever they're doing. That's a great thing there. And it's certainly evident that there are bumps in the road that you folks find. Curveballs are thrown at you. And I do admire you for the ways that you are handling those. And it's certainly evident that all of y'all have gone back to school because you're doing a real good job with your homework when you come prepared to these meetings. And again, I applaud you and thank all of you in the whole school system for the outstanding job you're doing.
Please come on.
He does. 225. Thank you, Mr. Liggin. We're you do. We appreciate that, we do. At this time, we're moving on to committee and staff reports, and first up is Ms. Smink from
Thank you.
Finance.
Thank you, Chairman Fuller, members of the board, Dr. Hartness. I just want to share a little bit of information with you this evening on a program that the federal government started quite a few years ago, but I think you might not be aware of it. And this is called the Teacher Loan Forgiveness Program. And it was created to encourage individuals to enter into and continue in the teaching profession at certain elementary and secondary schools that serve low-income families. The way it works, if you're a teacher and you have a federal Stafford or a federal direct loan that was borrowed, that you used to borrow funds for your education after October 1st of 1998, and if you teach 5 consecutive complete years at an eligible school, you may qualify to receive loan forgiveness of up to $5,000 or up to $17,500 if you, for a certain highly qualified secondary math and science teacher and elementary and secondary special ed teachers. What I found in the past that the teachers are, when they are in college, they are told about this program, and through the years, I usually get maybe a handful, half a dozen or so teachers who will come and they, as they go through the application process to have this loan forgiveness, they need to come to the central office and have someone verify that they work at one of these schools that meets the qualifications, and I have to also verify that the number of years that they've worked at that school. And like I said, usually I get about a half a dozen or so a year. And I just want, a couple months ago, I sent an email to our teachers and to remind them of this. And in that time frame, that short period, maybe 6 to 8 weeks, I've had about a half a dozen teachers come in and they're like, yes, that's right. So they came in, they filled out their application. So in the last couple of weeks, I've had as many teachers come in to try to get qualified for the loan forgiveness as I usually do in a year's time. And I know this teacher had to feel great, but I felt like I won the lottery because the other week I did get to sign off on a teacher who was going to receive the $17,500 loan forgiveness because she's a special education teacher. And I just wanted to share with you that this is out there for our teachers. And by bringing it up to the board meeting, mentioning again to remind our teachers that this is out there. And if you have this type of loan, please, please go through the application process and do what you can to have your loans forgiven.
I may just misunderstood it. Did you say certain schools or any public school system?
Any public schools, any school system, but it has to be a low-income school. So basically, it's a school that meets the Title I guidelines. Okay, so it's all of our schools except for one.
Thank you for that information, Ms. Smink. We're glad we had someone able to take advantage of it. That's
We've had the ones that get the $5,000, but it's nice to see
oh,
someone
absolutely.
have the.
That's awesome.
I'm telling you, it was like a nice. I think I was more excited than she was.
We're glad she qualified for that. At this time, we're moving on to facilities, and I will call on Mr. Spilman to come talk to us about the Canatcha roof warranty repair work.
Thank you, Chairman Fuller, board, Dr. Hartness, staff, and guests. For the ones that have been by Canatcha Elementary School, there's been some activities over there. I would like to start out by saying that this project has been a group effort from the start. This started in 2006 with a roof paint failure of Canatcha Elementary School. And Tom Evans started researching the warranty with the company, installed the roof, and the roofing company was putting the blame on the metal company, and the metal company was putting the blame on the roofing company, and that sort of thing. So To make a very long story short on that part of it, in March 2015, I submitted a warranty claim to Vincent Metal Products. And after several phone calls by me and Dr. Hartness and several emails of chasing people around, we finally got two inspectors out there, and we finally got to the right source of people. So Alltech Decorating is based out of Romoville, Illinois, who is hired by Ryerson Vincent Metal Corporation. They have started moving equipment, supplies in Canancer Elementary School last week. They're going to, this process will take approximately 4 to 6 weeks to complete. They're going to be putting in long days when possible, 7 days a week. They're going to sandblast the roof all the way to the metal, then wash it off, prime it, paint it, clear it, just like painting a car. And then they'll have 2 crews out there working along with that. And they've already, as of today, I was up there today, and they have basically cleared the entire cafeteria in 4 days of paint. So, but this warranty claim is worth about $135,000 to the school system to get this redone. And then, you know, which fortunate enough, we got into it before our time ran out. So I just wanted to present that so anybody would see what was going on over there, you would know what was happening. So thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate all your hard work on that and phone calls. I know I heard a little bit about that along the way, and it was a little. It was. We're glad we're getting that taken care of. That's. I know it was. There were some areas that were starting to look bad, and the longevity of that roof would have been a problem.
Well, I tell you, it really didn't look that bad from the ground, but on the roof, it was in terrible shape, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, so thank you.
Good. Well, thank you for all your hard work on that. Do we have any other comments or questions for Mr. Spillman? Seeing none, we're moving on to closed session portion of our meeting, and I will ask for a motion to go into closed session to preserve the attorney-client privilege pursuant to the North Carolina General Statutes listed on our agenda, to discuss personnel matters protected by state law, to discuss student matters made confidential by general statutes and FERPA. Do we have a motion? I have a motion by Ms. Owens. I have a second by Mr. Drexler. All in favor? Motion carries 7-0. We're now in closed session.